Hey everyone, Jim Coventry from Rotowire here. The Week 7 fantasy football players to avoid. Look, let's start out with the quarterbacks. How do we not talk about Russell Wilson? I mean, what more is there to say? One touchdown or fewer in 4 or 5 games. He had the great start on Monday night and just completely went to the drain. It did not look good. And then obviously he hurt his hamstring in some way. Just not good. Russell Wilson, if you're rostering him, I mean, I don't know how you don't drop him at this point. I don't know there's any reason to think that things are going to turn around anytime soon. And I know he's on a bye, but you need to address the situation with Matthew Stafford because coming out of his bye, you're going to have a ready replacement if you're not going to use him. He doesn't have a multi-touchdown game in any of his last three. Obviously, he doesn't run. He has thrown for 250 yards in each of his last 3 games. And it is possible that the Rams figure a couple things out on the bye, but they just lost their offensive left tackle, Joe Noteboom, and again, another further downgrade. They are playing with deep reserves along most of their line. So there could be some fundamental changes in the offense that could get the ball out quicker. They could move Allen Robinson into the slot a little bit to get him, the ball where in a Cooper Kupp, move him around more. But really, it's just window dressing. There's going to be no downfield element to the game because teams can just rush them. No team respects their running game. Nothing to fear there. So realistically, the Rams are not going to increase their offense anytime soon. So Matthew Stafford is a player that you can cut. Number 4, the tight ends. So aside from his massive game in Week 7, TJ Hockenson has just 4 catches for 22 yards and a touchdown in his other 2 recent games combined. He's had 7 target games. He's done very little with it. The game against Seattle is the best matchup he could have had. Amon-Ra St. Brown was out, so he owned the middle of the field. There is potentially a trade market for Hockenson, especially when you look at his season-long numbers, that 177-yard game with the 2 touchdowns. That is a big part, putting him high in the tight end rankings. And it would be smart to offer him up in trade to see if somebody might look at the numbers and say, wow, he's doing well. They might even see the target numbers and be enamored with that. But TJ Hockenson is a very difficult player to start right now. Again, with St. Brown back, very problematic for his usage in the middle of the field. And then Tyler Conklin, a player I loved in the preseason, I loved early in the season, not with Zach Wilson. He has 4 catches for 68 yards over his last 3 games total with Zach Wilson. Basically, he's useless. Even CJ Uzama, who wasn't involved, is now getting run and getting some of the targets. Conklin's an outstanding athlete and a very, very good receiver. But in this offense, the receivers are just being left to rot, and it's not a pretty scene. The Jets' defense is way better than I would have imagined, so they're able to run the ball, and it's very exciting for them. But Tyler Conklin right now is probably a drop. Hayden Hurst, 4 or fewer targets in 3 of his last 4 games. The one that he saw more targets was when T. Higgins was on the sidelines against the Ravens with the injured ankle. And remember back in Week 1, Hayden Hurst had a big target game. Maybe it was Week 2. Whenever T. Higgins had missed time in a previous game, Hurst had a lot of targets. So he's had a game with good targets in Higgins in the lineup, but for the most part, his role in the offense has slowed down quite a bit. So he's a streamer, not much more. Kyle Pitts, you got to talk about him, right? 4 receptions, 44 yards, and a touchdown on 7 targets over his last 2 games. He's a top 12 tight end, which is a super, super, super low bar to hit because he can, get some receptions. He can score a touchdown. But the Falcons are all about running the football right now, and Pitts is a blocker way more than he should be, but they're using their tight ends in a lot of various ways to block and get their running game going. So, again, if your expectation is that he just gets you a couple points or the possibility to score, fine. But any thought of him being, a player that's going to help your fantasy team consistently, that's obviously long past returning. And then the wide receivers, number 3. Well, I talked about Tyler Conklin, talk about Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson now. Elijah Moore, 1 catch for 11 yards on 4 targets in 2 games. Garrett Wilson, a little better, 6 catches for 76 yards in 3 games with Zach Wilson. Right now, either of them are really not startable. Garrett Wilson averaging 25 yards a game, Moore averaging 5.5 yards in 2 games. And, so realistically, again, I mean, Corey Davis is the one that's getting a little bit more targets, a little more production. It's just really bad for the passing game right now, and I don't know how you can start any of these Jets with confidence unless you have absolutely no other options. Romeo Doubs, we love the targets, 22 targets in his last 3 games, but he's only caught 12 of them, and it's been for 97 yards. So, and he's got a touchdown in there, but he's averaging 32 yards. And, again, the volume is there. Maybe it'll perk up over time, but Aaron Rodgers, looks like he's, not doing great right now. Some fantasy points are getting up there, working out with Alan Lazard. But right now, Dobbs is just a hope and pray and, volume base. And maybe he catches one of the long passes and maybe he scores a touchdown. But, he only has 2 games at more than 37 yards this season. So, again, he's a flex right now, and that's probably about it. Christian Kirk, 95 yards and a touchdown over his last 3 games. Why? Well, defenses realize there is no explosiveness in the Jaguars' passing attack. So what have defense have done? They've compressed the field. They realize there's no downfield element, so everything is getting tougher underneath. Travis Etienne as a receiver is, explosive out of the backfield, but there is no defense is going to take that passing attack seriously and have to drop their safeties. You could just load up inside and make Trevor Lawrence dink and dunk you. And then Brandon Cooks, he's been held to 22 or fewer yards in 2 of his last 3 games. He has 1 good game, 57 yards and a touchdown. Brandon Cooks, low volume passing attack. Nico Collins is now involved, so Cooks isn't the only show in town, is what he was banking on, and it's not quite there. Unless they come out of their bye improving things, Cooks is really tough to use in lineups. And then Drake London's next. 2 or 3 receptions in each of his last 3 games, averaging 30 yards during that span. Again, the running game is taking over. Until they start having some potential bad game script, Drake London's not going to see enough work to be helpful for fantasy managers. And then obviously, DJ Moore and 26 targets over 3 games. It's only resulted in 116 yards and 13 catches, catching half of his targets. Again, he's a player, I guess if you're counting on as a flex, long shot, but I don't know how you start him at this point. And then running backs. Well, Nathaniel Hackett says a lot of things. Said that Melvin Gordon's still a starter. Don't know about that. 16% of the snaps, 3 carries, bench for Latavius Murray, who washed out of the league twice. And he washed out once, and then he washed out with Baltimore last year. They certainly didn't bring him back, and Baltimore needed all kinds of help, and they wanted nothing to do with it seems like. So Melvin Gordon, I thought, was playing like a declining back. Other analysts are saying he looks fine. It's just the fumbles. I don't know. I think he's declining. It's so see anything special from him anymore. I just don't know how Mike Boone doesn't get a shot. They need explosiveness in that offense, and Lat Murray's not giving them that. Numbers were decent. They played the Chargers, but I wonder how much more Boone could have done if he had all those carries. But that's me. I'm not the coach. And Nathaniel Hackett is for 1 year, and unless they paid him enough, and they might decide to keep him around longer. But yeah, pretty toxic offensive environment in Denver right now. And then A.J. Dillon hasn't scored in any of his last 4 games. He saw a really low volume carry game, but that should perk back. He normally sees about 15 or so carries a game, but Dillon's not the upside guy you hope, but you're playing him. Just DFS, you're not playing him. And then the big names, the players who are a little bit down, these are more DFS guys to consider sitting when they play. You're playing them in season long because they're superstars, right? Lamar Jackson hasn't been over 210 yards and a touchdown in any of his last 3 games, although he has rushed between 58 and 77, so he's giving fantasy managers that weekly floor. Joe Burrow has been inconsistent. Last 3 games, 1, 2, 3 touchdowns, yardage all over the board, 217, 287, 300. What I did notice, though, was we went last week and we really put in heavily on him. When he doesn't face a pass rush, he's going to be fine. And faced the Saints last week. The Saints were like a bottom 10 pressure rate, so kind of felt he would do well. Not having Marshawn Lattimore help too, but the lack of pressure is what works. And Burrow has a real nice opportunity this week against an opponent that doesn't have a great pass rush either. So he looks like he has another good week coming up here. And then Aaron Jones, it went from 116 yards to 80 to 44, no touchdowns in 3 games. He's getting dragged down with the poor performance of the Packers offense. And that's the overall theme here. We've mentioned 3 Packers, and they are just faltering because the offense is just, they're not explosive, and they're predictable, and they're running more, Rodgers taking some shots, but the defense isn't respecting it. It's really more of like a horizontal offense. And again, defense can compress that. So not good. Then A.J. Brown, you're not playing him in DFS too much, 70 yards or fewer in 3 of his last 5 games. And during the last 5, he doesn't have a game over 95 yards. He scored twice this year, but just hasn't been an upside play. And then Darren Waller, he missed Wednesday's practice with a hamstring, but 3 receptions in each of his last 2 healthy games. And even when Foster Moreau was out and Hunter Renfrow was out, he's just not seeing work. Josh McDaniels, I don't know what he's doing, but that team invested a ton of money in their passing attack, their quarterback, Devontae Adams, and now they're feeding Josh Jacobs, who they didn't pick up his 5th-year option. They're giving him the ball like almost 30 times a game in the last 2 games. They're 1-4. I don't know what they're doing in terms of identity and long-term, but it is not good. Before I get to questions, if you're watching on YouTube, please smash the like and subscribe button. I'd appreciate it greatly. And of course, if you like the Rotowire content, you get a couple days free behind the paywall. Let's go to rotowire.com/try. You don't even need a credit card. Come by and check out the great content we have. All right, let's take some questions here. All right, let's see what we got. We got Shane. Need to know if you should go with Eno Benjamin Thursday night or Algier or Cam Sutton. Cortland Sutton, I imagine you mean. Your flex. So, Eno Benjamin is a bad matchup. The Saints are nasty on the ground. Benjamin had a great matchup and did okay with it. He'll get some targets, so he has a bit of a floor. Algier, he'll get his 10 or so carries. Not an upside play. He's a floor play. Sutton's going to see Sauce Gardner. And Russ is terrible. So at this point, I almost think that Benjamin gets enough volume as a runner and receiver because Algier is splitting work, and Benjamin probably won't really split much. So I'd probably give a slight edge to Benjamin despite the bad matchup. And then Shane, Keenan Allen. Oh no, they practice Wednesday. So if Keenan Allen's practicing, he's back at 100%. If they're putting him in to practice, he's ready to go. He's 100% if he's ready to go because they let him go a long time, but they didn't put him on the IR. So the reason they didn't put him on the IR, they thought he might be back, but they waited. So if he's practicing Thursday in full, then you play him 100%. He should be fine. Randy, all right. Yeah, OBJ. So I don't think he's going to play till late November, real close to the fantasy playoff window. And then even remember with the Rams last year, he didn't acclimate for like 6 weeks. It took him a while to fit into the offense. Wherever he goes, he's got to fit in. Now, if he goes with Aaron Rodgers, maybe, but sure, worth stashing, but he may not acclimate right away. He may not be a factor. I think the goal for him is NFL playoffs. That's the goal. Get him into a practice with the team, get him ready, and then deploy him in the playoffs. I think that's the goal. So I don't know that he's worth stashing, but again, if you've got nobody on the bench that's worth keeping and there's a spot for him, yeah, why not? All right, Joe, let's see. You prefer Henry or Otten. So if Mac Jones plays, he hadn't been throwing to Henry much this year, but it seems like Bailey Zappi has done really well with Henry. Otten should see quite a bit of work, and I think Tampa Bay is going to be angry this week. Tom Brady's going to be angry after laying an egg against the Steelers, again with their whole secondary out for the most part. So what I would say is this: if Zappi plays, I think Henry has a better floor. If Zappi doesn't play, and it's Mac Jones, and I go with K. Otten. That's the way I'd look at it. Okay, to drop Warren or hold it. I don't think his role is going to grow to a part where he's a lead back. I think he's going to be seeing, 5 to 9 touches. And so that's what you're probably getting. And I don't know how much upside there is with him. I think it'll be a pass heavier team. So use that as your litmus test. If that's good for you, if you're going to get, 5 to 8 fantasy points, it might be good. But if you need, an upgrade at a different position, then you got to consider that. And then Randy, it's going to be tough with Thornton. They drafted heavily. They invested heavily in a second-round pick, and he's already produced a little bit. It's been with Bailey Zappi. Don't know if Mac Jones is going to go right to him. Sometimes it's a quarterback thing, but I think you roster him, and I think you see what he does. Right now he's kind of tough to start, but I think that you roster him, and if he has another good week, or he does one with Mac Jones, then I think you might be onto something there. I don't know how much they want to pass, but there are games they're going to. And then Randy, production. Oh, it's horrible quarterback play. It's horrible quarterback play. That's all it is. That's all it is. It's not even the coordinator. He's getting targets. He's just the ball's not. He caught half of his last 26 targets. It's a quarterback, Randy. That's all. DJ Moore's been in a rotten scenario in his career. He's had a couple good years, but he's a superstar. He's just horrid situation. A lot of that this year. Elijah Moore. A lot of players are getting buried by their situation. Iron Eddie, full PPR. You have Brian Robinson in the flex. You play Peoples-Jones. Robinson is a floor. I think we were looking at that. We saw his workload is pretty good last week, and he had like a week and a half off. So I think as he acclimates in, I think he gets work. Now, Ron Rivera did say that he should have gotten Gibson more work. I don't know what quite that means, if that means Robinson's going to get less work. But I think based on what we saw, he probably sees he's probably the safest of them. Peoples-Jones is really, really up and down, and that's the problem with him. He may get a 0, and then there's weeks where he gets the ball, so he's very difficult to trust. Wandale, he had the touchdown last week, which is nice. Low snap share, and I don't know how much that's going up this week. I think Wandale is could be the boom bust because if he gets in there, he could be really involved here and do really well. So I think he's your boom bust play. He can do very little, but he could, he's a slot guy that can be pretty explosive. I think Robinson's the safe floor play. So that's I'd probably keep him there. But if you're in a matchup where you need a real upside, then you might have to take a shot at risking low score for him. All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you hanging with me. Hope everybody has a great day, and we will talk soon.